Pat is kind of an afterthought a little bit on the work rate side.
I'm tired of being humble. I'm tired of letting people think they got a chance. The tribal chief is head and shoulders above everybody.
Hey, guys, we're here at the locker room. We'll talk about Pat Patterson, jealous of Triple H. Real life smoke between Triple H and Pat Patterson. It's a Turnbuckle King here. Toss Ring Scandal. Get the likes up in the locker room. About to air some dirty laundry. Now, we know that Pat Patterson and Triple H, they was not seen together too much, but Pat Patterson is known for being with Vince McMahon back in the early days, being a creative, giving him, insight of what to do. We've seen that over the years for the early fans, and later on, some people seen Pat Patterson involved as one of the corporate stooges of Vince McMahon. We know that as well. So with that being said, he was a pioneer, they say, in the wrestling industry. At the point where Pat Patterson passed away, Vince McMahon said he was more than the first Intercontinental Champion, followed the Royal Rumble, laid out the foundation for WWE, mentored, shaped careers, creativity sparked, he loves them. And then later on, we seen that Pat Patterson was not with Vince McMahon before he passed away. It was Triple H. We saw more of him close to Vince McMahon, giving him insight, giving him good ideas what to do in WWE and creative and backstage. We know that as well. And that all led up to Triple H being corporate and becoming the chief content officer of WWE that he is today. And Triple H started being in corporate back in 2010. So it's crazy. But they said that Pat Patterson was jealous of Triple H and of his relationship, because on a recent episode of Grilling with JR, Jim Ross, he discussed the issue between the two, and he said if they had issues, it was behind the scenes. He said it was minor, and he said everything was changing because as Pat Patterson was getting up in age, we didn't see him too much with Vince McMahon in the WWE anymore. He was kind of in and out, and we saw more of Triple H instead. The thing about it is, Pat kind of got nudged aside. They said Triple H, he started doing a lot of stuff Pat was doing. So it was a change that Pat Patterson saw that he had adapted to, and they say that he adapted very well. But other than that, though, Pat Patterson, he is responsible, like Vince McMahon said, not just for Royal Rumble and being the first Intercontinental Champion. Pat Patterson was behind a lot of people. He liked Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle. He really liked The Rock, and the animosity between Rock and Triple H. And Triple H, him and Pat Patterson was not always on the same side. Now, when the interview, Jim Ross did say, on his podcast that there was no real life animosity personally between Triple H and Pat Patterson. It was more a professional thing because Pat Patterson saw things one way, Triple H saw things another way. It gets like that in business. People don't see eye to eye professionally, but it doesn't mean once they leave work that it was a personal issue. And Jim Ross talks more about that on his podcast, Grilling with JR, and we'll hear more about that right now.
Of retiring someday soon. That talk grew more serious over the past month or so. The decision was accelerated due to a conflict behind the scenes with Triple H. Patterson, the main booker of the WWF in the early 80s, is credited with having a spectacular mind for laying out epic matches, including some of the best Royal Rumbles and biggest matches involving The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, and Ultimate Warrior. His booking philosophy was sometimes criticized for being too juvenile or based on ha-ha humor, as it's referred to within WWE. Recently, McMahon asked Patterson to evaluate the Raw roster, and his conclusion was that Triple H was the problem. He felt that focusing the brand around Triple H wasn't working. Especially troublesome was Hunter's failure to elevate new talents to a main event level. Eugene and Chris Benoit were two examples of wrestlers who didn't end up any hotter after feuding with Hunter than they were before, in part because of how they were discarded after feuding with Hunter. Quote, "Sure, Hunter does jobs, but he doesn't elevate anyone," says one veteran wrestler. It's good that Pat finally spoke up. Since Patterson did speak up, he found himself in hot water with Triple H, who is as much of an influence over WWE's direction as anyone other than Vince himself. Patterson and Hunter have always had a tense relationship, dating back to Patterson favoring Rock over Hunter, where both were climbing the ranks in the late 90s. Patterson worked closely with The Rock and was seen as quote unquote his guy. Hunter was aware that he was battling for a top position, and he felt Patterson siding with The Rock worked against him. Patterson also wasn't a fan of the way Hunter would politic backstage. He noticed Hunter's frequent nitpicking of Rock's performances in front of others and saw it as counterproductive and petty. They butted heads forever, said one wrestler who knows both well. They got along on the surface, but they always had differences in philosophies, said another wrestler. Hunter was always so jealous of Rock, so he saw Pat as the enemy. Many suspect Patterson will return. Quote, he'll quit for 6 months, then return. Vince and Pat are too close. I think he'll come back when he thinks he's needed. He just feels jilted right now. Talk to me a little bit about this resignation from Pat in October of 2004 and how far off is Keller's report that it's probably because of Triple H.
Well, I think that Pat saw his role diminishing for whatever reasons there may be. I think, when I was reading this, our research material this week to do this show, as I said, I said it too much about having plenty of time on the airplane or the airport to read and research. Pat, I would say this: Pat felt like a little jilted lover. He was joined to hip events for years and years and years, in pivotal years, not just a year like in 2004. I'm talking about years where your balls are on the line because if we don't do well, we're not going to be in business. Some of those WrestleMania gambles that Vince took, was just immense. And Pat was right there. Pat was a creative genius for a lot of that stuff. Pat did have a propensity for humor. I'm not a big humor guy, and as it relates to wrestling, I think humor should be organic and real and natural. I think that pro wrestling should be more athletically oriented. That's just me. Somebody will say, well, why are you at AEW? Because they pay me a lot of money, and I like the people I work for. And I love wrestling. I love helping these young kids. Are they doing too many flips and flops for my taste? Yeah, they are. To be honest with you, they sure are. But they're weaning themselves off that a little bit because, Conrad, that type of wrestling is not new and fresh anymore. How many times have you seen a 450, a 620, or blah 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 blah? And now it's not new anymore. It's not new. So we got to figure out something else that's going to get the people's attention. It might be a wrestling match. It might be using psychology and grabbing them by the emotional balls and pulling them right along in the story. So I think Pat felt jilted. He wasn't wasn't joined to hip by Vince. And Hunter wanted to be joined to hip by Vince, with Vince, I should say, because he'd grown up in that WWE environment. He saw that Vince was the boss. And look, it worked out pretty well for Hunter. Hunter was right along. Hey, look, if I play my cards right, I'm going to be a pretty good spot here. He was right, and there he is. And Patterson resigned because of those hurt feelings. And he knew that Hunter was in a position where he was not going to be supplanted. So Pat decides to take a walk. All of us knew he wouldn't leave him forever. The discussion would have probably been at catering, how long do you think Patterson would be gone? Oh, a month, 2 months, maybe 3, something like that. So I think that Pat's contributions are amazing. He's a brilliant Finnish guy, as good as I've ever been around, quite frankly. But his propensity when he gets bored is to filter off and become ha-ha, as he called it. He said wrestling has to have ha-ha. Well, I can guarantee you that's this. When he was working for Roy Shire in San Francisco, when they were selling those Cow Palace shows time and time again, and Pat had a 12 or 13, 14-year run in one territory, it wasn't ha-ha. It was serious shit. And so he knew the serious stuff and how it worked better, but he enjoyed the comedy. That's just his personality. But he and Hunter didn't have different ideas on things in that regard. Pat never came to me and said that Hunter's a shit, blah, 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 or vice versa. But Pat, I think, felt like his feelings got a little bit hurt, feathers ruffled. But as somebody said, as Keller said, they thought it would be a short-term deal, and it was. Pat's still under payroll. He's 80. He was in his mid-60s when he resigned. He's in his 80s now. He's still getting paid. So it was a knee-jerk.
So that was Jim Ross and Conrad Thompson talking about the whole animosity between Pat Patterson and Triple H. Pat Patterson was used to things going a certain way for years, dated back to the 70s and 80s and 90s. Once he was not around much anymore, Triple H was around. He saw that things were not the same. He didn't want to adapt to it, but he eventually did adapt to it, as JR said. And Triple H, he just had a big vision for WWE that we see currently today. And Pat Patterson may see that vision back then. He's more old school. Triple H is more current and modern, as we see in WWE. And there were guys like Dolph Ziggler, who I think he spoke on an interview back with Francine from ECW, that Pat Patterson was very huge on him as a competitor and a performer. And because at the time Pat Patterson was in and out later in his career, professional career that is, it really didn't get the push for Dolph Ziggler that needed. However, Triple H was not a big fan, as they say, allegedly, backstage was not a big fan of Dolph Ziggler because, Dolph Ziggler he's not one of Triple H's people. And I know Triple H, he's not like Vince McMahon where he thinks of the only muscular and 6'4", 300 pounds. He do like guys that are small and are high flyers. We see that where he was a fan, he's big on Sami Zayn, Ricochet when he was in WWE and others. But I did not know that these two had an animosity and a professional beef. And I think it was more Pat Patterson having animosity towards Triple H because it was just jealousy that because Pat Patterson was so close to Triple H and he was always around him, he saw that Triple H was somewhat taking his place and Pat didn't like it. And we know that Pat Patterson, he did eventually not be seen WWE much longer, and he did pass away back in 2020 at age 79. So Triple H, he never spoke negatively about Pat Patterson. He always talked highly of him. He always spoke of the creative and innovative things he did in the wrestling industry. Like he said in an interview back in the beginning with Ryan Satan on Fox, that Pat Patterson, he's an afterthought, meaning that he's an afterthought of what he's done in wrestling. He's so much known for what he's done after his wrestling career, which is being behind creative and get involved, with ideas for Royal Rumble and other things. And Pat Patterson, I never heard, there's no interview of him speaking bad of Triple H, but I could see him being jealous of Triple H because it's just, the old school mentality. They want things to stay the same way and never, ever change. They don't want to adapt unless they're really forced to. And that's all I have regarding Pat Patterson jealous of Triple H. The real smoke between Triple H and Pat Patterson. You guys let me know what you think of the interview and everything. Soon to videos will pop up, guys. You already know what it is. OUT.